Jeff Jenkins and Harvey Payton are legal analysts on the Blankenship criminal trial, and now we have reached the final stage, which is jury deliberations. The jury got the case at 3:55 Tuesday afternoon. Deliberations are underway after closing arguments on this day, Harvey, that were probably effective on both sides.
They were indeed. I mean, the government did an excellent job. This morning, Booth Goodwin gave the opening part of the government's closing statement and did it in a really effective way, because this is a circumstantial evidence case, which requires all of the parts to be drawn together so the jury can see the path to a guilty verdict. The jury's not going to convict somebody unless they believe there's a reasonable, factual basis to do so. And U.S. Attorney Goodwin showed pictures of the witnesses that, as he discussed them, he talked about their specific testimony and related that to the charges against the defendant, and then he stopped. He drew it together, stopped, and turned over the room to the defense counsel. So here's defense counsel confronted with this fairly factual, straightforward representation, and I think that Mr. Taylor probably had to modify the beginning of his presentation to deal with that. Then Mr. Taylor, who we all know is an experienced, able lawyer, he adopted what is really not a common, but it's a very effective practice in criminal defense practitioners, and that is to try and leave the jury with questions. You notice towards the end of his closing argument, he said, "Let me give you 7 questions, all of which cannot be answered. Where is the witness who will say this? Where is the documents which says that?" Well, they don't exist. They're not essential to the case, but the hope is that the jury will say, well, we can't answer that question, and they'll spend time looking for that answer and conclude, as they must, at the end, well, it doesn't exist, and therefore there's no case. Well, in his rebuttal, Assistant U.S. Attorney Ruby flipped the tables, I thought, and significantly enhanced the government's position. He said, well, let me ask you 5 questions. Question number 1, was this man a part of a conspiracy, which he then used to pull all the dots together? Was he willfully a part of this? Were there willful violations? Was there a lie about security? So his questions all related specifically to the facts, and as you saw, he cited the jurors to specific exhibit numbers, and they wrote them down. They're going to look, so whose questions are they going to look to answer? Mr. Taylor's, which are impossible, or Mr. Ruby's, and if they answer Mr. Ruby's, Mr. Blankenship's going to be convicted.
Okay, 2 things here. The final statements of both. What Taylor left the jury with was, we shouldn't even be here.
That's correct. We shouldn't be here. This whole prosecution is based on thin air, questions that can't be answered, and assumptions that have no reasonable basis.
And what Ruby left the jury with was, this is about accountability, and it's far time for justice to be done.
Right. Justice demands. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone will dispute, regardless of the outcome, that this is a just prosecution. It wasn't made up out of thin air. It was based upon an investigation that lasted 5 years, and that was mentioned time and time again to the jury by the defense. The time is now. I mean, Mr. Ruby did a good job of putting the burden on the jury to do their job, and to him, he's telling them, your job is to convict this man for what happened, for what he did, which is break the law. That's what he says.
Harvey, thanks. We don't know how long the jury will be out.
Nope.
That's always a guess, and we can't guess that. So it started at 3:55 on Tuesday afternoon. Keep it tuned right here, and we'll have the information when the jury has a decision. For Harvey Payton, I'm Jeff Jenkins, WVMetroNews.com.